The ivory keys felt cool beneath Lily's fingertips, smoother than anything she had ever touched in her 8 years of life. The grand piano sat in the center of the Grandview Hotel lobby, like a sleeping giant, its polished black surface reflecting the crystal chandeliers that hung from the vaulted ceiling 30 feet above. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in downtown Chicago, and the lobby was nearly empty, except for a few business travelers checking in at the front desk, their rolling suitcases clicking against the marble floor. Lily's mother, Rosa Martinez, was upstairs on the 14th floor finishing her shift as a housekeeper. Rosa had worked at the Grandview for 6 years, scrubbing toilets, changing sheets, and vacuuming carpets in rooms that cost more per night than she made in a week. Tonight her shift had run late because 2 of the other housekeepers had called in sick, and Rosa never said no when they asked her to cover extra rooms. She needed every dollar. Lily was supposed to wait in the staff break room in the basement, a windowless space with flickering fluorescent lights and the constant hum of industrial washing machines. But the break room smelled like bleach and old coffee, and the metal folding chair hurt her back. So she had slipped upstairs, moving through the service corridors like a shadow, until she found herself standing in the grand lobby, staring at the piano. She had never touched a real piano before. At school, there was an old keyboard in the music room, with half the keys broken and no sound coming from the speakers. At home, in the cramped 2-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother and her younger brother, there was no space for instruments. No money for lessons, no room for dreams that cost more than survival. But there was music inside Lily. It lived in her bones, hummed in her blood, whispered in her dreams. She heard melodies everywhere, in the rhythm of the city buses, in the pattern of raindrops on windows, in the way her mother's breathing slowed when she finally fell asleep after a double shift. And there was one melody in particular, one that had been planted in her mind 6 months ago by a woman in the park. The woman had been old, with silver hair that hung in tangled knots and clothes that smelled like the streets. She sat on a bench near the playground where Lily went after school, and sometimes she would hum. The humming would turn into singing, and the singing would turn into something else entirely, something that made Lily stop playing and just listen. One day the woman had noticed Lily watching her. "You hear it too, don't you?" the woman had said, her eyes suddenly clear and focused, despite the confusion that usually clouded them. The music that lives underneath everything else. Lily had nodded, unable to speak. The woman had smiled, and for a moment she looked young again, beautiful even. "Come here, child. Let me teach you something before I forget it again." And she had taught Lily a melody, note by note, making Lily repeat it back until it was burned into her memory. The woman's fingers had moved in the air, as if pressing invisible keys, and Lily had watched, memorizing every movement. The melody was sad and beautiful and complicated, with parts that twisted around each other like braided rope. The woman had called it the Song of What Remains. "This is important," the woman had said, gripping Lily's small hand with surprising strength. "This is the only thing I have left that matters. Promise me you'll remember it. Promise me you'll play it someday." Lily had promised. 2 weeks later, the woman was gone. Lily had asked the other people who lived in the park, the ones who slept on benches and under bridges, and they told her the old woman had died in her sleep. No funeral, no family, just gone, like she had never existed at all. But the melody remained. Now, standing in the Grandview Hotel lobby, Lily looked around carefully. The front desk clerks were busy with guests. The concierge was on the phone. The security guard was walking toward the elevators, his back turned. Nobody was watching. Lily climbed onto the piano bench. Her feet didn't quite reach the floor. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the weight of them, the way they wanted to be pressed. And then, without thinking, without planning, she began to play. The first notes were hesitant, uncertain. Her fingers didn't know exactly where to go, and she had to search for the right keys. But the melody was there, living inside her, guiding her hands. And as she played, something extraordinary happened. The music that had existed only in her mind, only in her memory, suddenly became real. It filled the lobby, echoing off the marble walls and the high ceiling, transforming the cold, expensive space into something warm and alive. Lily closed her eyes and let the melody take over. She forgot about the hotel, forgot about waiting for her mother, forgot about being 8 years old and poor and invisible. There was only the music, only the promise she had made to a dying woman, only the notes that poured out of her like water from a broken dam. She didn't notice when the front desk clerk stopped typing and looked up. She didn't see when the guests in the lobby paused their conversations, and turned toward the piano. She didn't hear when the security guard, a thick-necked man named Derek who took his job very seriously, started walking quickly across the lobby, his hand already reaching for his radio. "Hey!" Derek's voice cut through the music like a knife. "Hey, kid! Get away from there!" Lily's eyes snapped open. Her hands froze on the keys. The melody stopped abruptly, leaving a terrible silence in its wake. Derek was standing right next to the piano now, his face red with anger. "That piano is not a toy. It's for professional musicians only. What are you even doing in this lobby? Where are your parents?" Lily's heart was pounding so hard, she thought it might break through her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was just waiting for my mom. She works here. She's a housekeeper." Derek's expression hardened. "I don't care who your mom is. You can't be up here touching things that don't belong to you. You need to go back downstairs to the staff area right now." "I'm sorry," Lily said again, sliding off the piano bench. Her legs were shaking. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Too late for that." Derek grabbed his radio. "This is Derek in the main lobby. I need someone from housekeeping management down here. We've got a situation." Lily felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had learned a long time ago that crying didn't help anything. It just made people uncomfortable and angry. "Please don't tell my mum," Lily said quietly. "She'll lose her job." "Should have thought about that before you decided to put your grubby hands all over a $50,000 piano," Derek said. He wasn't being cruel, exactly. He was just doing his job, enforcing the rules that kept the Grandview Hotel exclusive and expensive and separate from people like Lily and her mother. A small crowd had gathered now. Hotel guests stood at a distance, watching the scene with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. A woman in a fur coat whispered something to her husband. A businessman in a suit shook his head and went back to his phone. Nobody stepped forward to help. That's when the elevator at the far end of the lobby opened and Alexander Ross stepped out. Alexander was 42 years old, tall and lean, with dark hair that was just starting to gray at the temples. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that had been tailored perfectly to his frame, and his shoes were Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine. He was the CEO of Ross Hospitality Group, which owned the Grandview Hotel and 47 other luxury properties around the world. He was worth approximately $1.2 billion, though he rarely thought about his wealth in concrete numbers. Money, for Alexander, was simply a tool, a way to build and create and control. He had been upstairs in the executive suite, reviewing quarterly reports and preparing for a board meeting the next morning. He had planned to go straight to his car and drive home to his penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. But as he stepped out of the elevator, he heard something that made him stop. Music, or rather, the memory of music, because it had already stopped. But the echo of it still hung in the air, and Alexander's entire body had gone rigid with recognition. He knew that melody. It was impossible, but he knew it. His sister Catherine had composed it 23 years ago, when she was 17 and he was 19. She had played it for him once, late at night in their parents' house, her fingers flying over the keys with the kind of genius that couldn't be taught, only born. She had called it The Song of What Remains, and she had told him it was about memory, about the things that survive even after everything else is gone. Catherine had been a prodigy, the kind of musical talent that appears once in a generation. She had been accepted to Juilliard at 16, had performed at Carnegie Hall at 17, had been courted by record labels and symphony orchestras. Everyone said she would be one of the greatest pianists of her time, and then at 18, something in her mind had broken. The doctors called it early-onset schizophrenia with dementia-like symptoms. Catherine called it the fog. She would forget where she was, who she was, what year it was. She would have conversations with people who weren't there. She would wake up screaming from nightmares she couldn't remember. The medications helped sometimes, but they also dulled the music inside her, and Catherine said she would rather be lost in the fog than live in a world without music. Alexander had tried everything. The best doctors, the best facilities, the best treatments. He had spent millions trying to save his sister. But Catherine kept slipping away piece by piece until the brilliant young woman he had known was buried under layers of confusion and fear. 5 years ago, Catherine had disappeared from the care facility where she had been living. Alexander had hired private investigators, offered rewards, searched for months. But Catherine had vanished into the streets of Chicago, becoming one of the invisible people who sleep in doorways and under bridges, whose names nobody knows and whose deaths nobody mourns. 3 months ago, Alexander had received a call from the Cook County Medical Examiner's office. They had found Catherine's body in a park on the south side. She had died peacefully in her sleep, they said. No signs of violence, no evidence of suffering. Just an old homeless woman who had closed her eyes and never opened them again. Alexander had buried his sister in a private ceremony with only himself and the priest in attendance. He had cried for the first time since he was a child, and he had tried to move on, to bury his grief under work and responsibility and the endless demands of running a business empire. But now, standing in the lobby of his own hotel, he had just heard his sister's music. Alexander's eyes scanned the lobby and immediately found the source of the commotion. A security guard was standing next to the grand piano, and next to him was a small girl with dark hair and brown skin, wearing jeans that were too short and a t-shirt that had been washed so many times the colors had faded to ghosts. The girl looked terrified. Alexander walked toward them, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. The security guard didn't notice him approaching because he was too busy talking into his radio. The girl noticed, though. Her eyes met Alexander's, and he saw something in them that made his breath catch. Intelligence, sadness, and something else. Something that looked like music made visible. What's happening here? Alexander's voice was quiet, but it carried authority that made everyone in the lobby turn and look. Derek spun around, and his face went pale when he recognized his boss. "Mr. Ross, I'm sorry, sir. I was just handling a situation. This child was playing the lobby piano without permission. I'm trying to locate her parent and—" "Let her finish," Alexander said. Derek blinked. "Sir? The music," Alexander said, still looking at Lily. "Let her finish playing." There was a long moment of confused silence. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mr. Ross, with all due respect, the lobby piano is reserved for—" "I own this hotel," Alexander said, his voice still quiet but now edged with steel. "I own the piano, and I'm telling you to let her finish." Derek stepped back immediately, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Yes, sir, of course, sir." Alexander turned his full attention to Lily. Up close, he could see that she had been crying, though she was trying hard not to show it. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides, and she was trembling slightly. "What's your name?" Alexander asked gently. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily Martinez." "Lily, that melody you were playing, where did you learn it?" Lily hesitated. She had learned from experience that adults didn't always believe children, especially children like her. But there was something in this man's eyes, something that looked like he was holding his breath, waiting for an answer that mattered more than anything in the world. "A lady taught me," Lily said finally. "In the park. She lived outside. She didn't have a home, but she knew music. She said it was important, that I had to remember it and play it someday." Alexander's hands were shaking now. He clasped them behind his back so nobody would see. "This lady, what did she look like?" "She was old. She had long gray hair. Sometimes she seemed confused, like she didn't know where she was. But when she talked about music, she was different, clear, like she was remembering who she used to be." Lily paused, then added quietly, "She was nice to me. She said I had music inside me, that I could hear things other people couldn't." Alexander closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "What was her name? Did she tell you her name?" "She said her name was Catherine," Lily said. "She said it meant pure in some old language. She said she used to be pure once, before the fog came." The lobby had gone completely silent. Even the people at the front desk had stopped what they were doing to watch. Alexander stood perfectly still, and for a moment he looked like a statue, like something carved from stone that might shatter if touched. "Catherine was my sister," Alexander said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "She was a brilliant pianist. She was sick and I lost her. I'd been looking for her for 5 years, and 3 months ago I found out she had died." Lily's eyes went wide. "The lady in the park, that was your sister?" "Yes." Alexander had to stop and clear his throat. "That melody you were playing, she composed it when she was 17. I thought it was lost forever. I thought nobody else in the world knew it except me, but she taught it to you. She made me promise to remember it," Lily said. "She said it was the only thing she had left that mattered." Alexander looked at this small girl, this child who had somehow become the keeper of his sister's last gift to the world, and he felt something crack open inside his chest. It was grief, yes, but it was also something else, something that felt almost like hope. "Will you play it for me?" Alexander asked. "The whole thing from beginning to end?" Lily glanced at the security guard who was now standing several feet away, looking deeply uncomfortable. "I won't get in trouble?" "No," Alexander said firmly. "You won't get in trouble, I promise." Lily climbed back onto the piano bench. Her hands were still shaking, but she placed them on the keys and took a deep breath, and then she began to play. This time she didn't stop. This time she let the melody unfold completely, with all its complicated twists and turns, all its moments of sadness and beauty and strange, unexpected joy. She played the way Catherine had taught her, with feeling instead of technique, with heart instead of precision. She made mistakes, hit wrong notes, had to pause sometimes to remember what came next, but none of that mattered because the soul of the music was there, pure and true and heartbreaking. Alexander stood perfectly still and listened to his sister's voice speaking to him from beyond the grave, carried through the hands of a child who had shown her kindness in a park. He listened to the melody that Catherine had created when she was young and brilliant and whole, before the fog had taken her, before the streets had claimed her, before death had finally given her peace. And he understood what Catherine had been trying to say with this music, what she had wanted him to remember. That love remains, that beauty remains, that even when everything else is lost, even when the mind breaks and the body fails and the world forgets your name, the things that matter most somehow survive. They survive in the memory of a child, in the notes of a song, in the echo of kindness shown to a stranger. When Lily finished playing, there was a long moment of absolute silence. Then, slowly, the people in the lobby began to applaud. It started with one person, then another. Then everyone was clapping. The woman in the fur coat had tears running down her face. The businessman had put away his phone and was wiping his eyes. Even Derek, the security guard, was clapping. Though he still looked confused about what exactly was happening, Alexander walked to the piano and knelt down so he was at eye level with Lily. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for remembering her. Thank you for keeping her music alive." Lily nodded, not quite understanding why this was so important, but understanding that it was. "How long have you been playing piano?" Alexander asked. "I've never played before," Lily admitted. "Not a real piano. I've only touched a broken keyboard at school, but I can hear the music in my head and I just try to make my fingers match what I hear." Alexander stared at her. "You've never had lessons?" "My mum can't afford lessons. She works really hard, but we don't have extra money for things like that." Alexander was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "Lily, you have a gift, a rare gift. The kind of musical intuition you just demonstrated can't be taught. It's something you're born with. My sister had it and you have it too." "Really?" Lily's voice was small, hopeful. "Really?" Alexander stood up and looked around the lobby until he spotted a woman in a housekeeper's uniform who had just emerged from the service corridor. She was in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and exhaustion written in every line of her face. When she saw Lily sitting at the piano with a crowd around her and a man in an expensive suit talking to her, the woman's face went pale with fear. "Lily!" Rosa Martinez hurried across the lobby, her voice sharp with panic. "Lily, what are you doing? I told you to wait in the break room." "Mom, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, sir," Rosa said to Alexander, not even looking at him directly, because she had learned long ago not to make eye contact with the wealthy guests. "My daughter shouldn't have been up here. She knows better. It won't happen again." "Mrs. Martinez," Alexander said gently, "your daughter didn't do anything wrong." Rosa finally looked at him, and her eyes widened when she recognized who he was. Every employee at the Grandview knew Alexander Ross by sight, though most of them had never spoken to him directly. "Mr. Ross, I'm so sorry. Please don't fire me. I need this job. I'll make sure Lily never comes up here again." "Mrs. Martinez, I don't want to fire you. I want to talk to you about your daughter. She has extraordinary musical talent." Rosa looked confused. "Talent?" She just played a very complex piano composition from memory, despite never having had a single lesson. That kind of ability is extremely rare. With proper training, she could become a remarkable pianist. Rosa's expression shifted from confusion to something harder, more guarded. "Mr. Ross, I appreciate you saying that, but we can't afford piano lessons. I work 2 jobs just to keep food on the table and pay rent. Music lessons are for people with money." "I understand," Alexander said, "but I'd like to offer Lily a full scholarship to the Chicago Conservatory of Music. It's one of the best music schools in the country. They have a program for exceptionally gifted young students, all expenses paid, including the instrument, books, everything." Rosa stared at him. "Why would you do that?" Because your daughter kept my sister's music alive, Alexander said simply. Because she showed kindness to a woman who had nothing. Because talent like this shouldn't be wasted. And because, he paused, then continued quietly, because I failed to save my sister, but maybe I can help save the music she left behind. Rosa was shaking her head before he even finished speaking. No, thank you, but no. Alexander was taken aback. I'm sorry? I said no. Rosa's voice was firm now, almost angry. I don't take charity. I work for everything my family has. I don't need some rich man swooping in to save us like we're a project. Mrs. Martinez, this isn't charity. Your daughter has genuine talent. My daughter has a lot of things, Rosa interrupted. She's smart, she's kind, she's creative, but we don't need handouts from people who feel guilty about their own problems. We're doing fine on our own. Mom, Lily said quietly, I want to learn piano. We'll get you lessons when we can afford them, Rosa said, not looking at her daughter. When I've saved up enough money. That could take years, Alexander said. By then, the critical development period for musical training will have passed. Lily is at the perfect age to begin serious study. Waiting could mean losing this opportunity forever. Then we'll lose it, Rosa said. At least we'll lose it with our dignity and tact. She grabbed Lily's hand and started to pull her away from the piano. Lily looked back at Alexander, her eyes full of confusion and disappointment, but she didn't resist her mother. Alexander watched them go, frustration and sadness warring inside him. He understood Rosa's pride, understood her need to maintain control over her own life and her daughter's future. But he also understood that pride could be a prison, that sometimes refusing help was just another way of hurting yourself. He stood in the lobby for a long time after they left, staring at the piano, thinking about his sister and the music that had died with her, thinking about a little girl with a gift she might never get to develop, thinking about all the ways the world wastes beauty because of pride and fear, and the walls people build between themselves. And then, slowly, an idea began to form. Alexander Ross didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse apartment, staring out at the lights of Chicago stretching to the horizon, and he thought about Catherine. He thought about the last conversation they'd had before she disappeared, when she was still lucid enough to speak in complete sentences, but already slipping away into the fog that would eventually consume her completely. I'm scared of being forgotten, Catherine had told him, her hands trembling as she gripped her coffee cup. Not of dying. I'm scared that when I'm gone it'll be like I never existed at all, like all the music inside me will just vanish. You won't be forgotten, Alexander had promised her. I'll make sure of that. But he had failed. Catherine had died alone on the streets, and her music had died with her. Except it hadn't, not completely. A little girl in a park had listened when nobody else would. A child had remembered when everyone else had forgotten. By the time the sun rose over Lake Michigan, Alexander had made his decision. He spent the next 3 days making phone calls, scheduling meetings, and pulling together resources. He consulted with music educators, philanthropic advisors, and legal experts. He reached out to the Chicago Conservatory of Music and several other institutions. He drafted proposals, revised budgets, and created organizational structures. On the 4th day, he called a press conference. The conference room at Ross Hospitality Group headquarters was packed with journalists, cameras, and recording equipment. Alexander stood at the podium in a navy suit, his expression calm and professional, though his heart was racing. Thank you all for coming, he began. Today I'm announcing the creation of the Catherine Ross Foundation for Musical Education. This foundation will provide free, high-quality music education to children from low-income families throughout the Chicago area, with plans to expand nationally within 5 years. The journalists started taking notes furiously. Cameras flashed. The foundation will offer private lessons, group classes, instrument loans, and performance opportunities completely free of charge to any child who demonstrates interest and aptitude in music, regardless of their family's financial situation. We'll be partnering with established music schools and hiring professional instructors. Our goal is to ensure that economic barriers never prevent a child from developing their musical gifts. Alexander paused, then continued, his voice becoming more personal. This foundation is named after my sister, Catherine Ross, who was an extraordinarily talented pianist. Catherine struggled with mental illness and eventually became homeless. She died 3 months ago on the streets of this city. But before she died, she did something remarkable. She taught her music to a child who listened. She passed on her gift to someone who had nothing but was willing to receive it. That child reminded me that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity does not. This foundation is my attempt to change that. A journalist raised her hand. Mr. Ross, what inspired you to create this foundation now? Alexander smiled slightly. I met a little girl named Lily Martinez who played my sister's music, despite never having had a formal piano lesson in her life. She has extraordinary natural ability, but her family can't afford training. I offered her a scholarship, and her mother refused it. She refused because she has pride, because she doesn't want to accept what she sees as charity. And I realized that she's right. It shouldn't be charity. Access to music education shouldn't be a gift that rich people bestow on poor people when they're feeling generous. It should be a right. It should be available to everyone. So instead of trying to help one child, I'm going to try to help thousands. Another journalist spoke up. How much money are you committing to this foundation? Initially, $50 million, Alexander said, with plans to increase funding as the program expands. There was a collective gasp in the room. $50 million was a significant sum, even for someone with Alexander's wealth. And I'm looking for a student ambassador for the foundation, Alexander continued. Someone who embodies the mission and can inspire other children. I'm hoping that Lily Martinez will agree to be our first student ambassador, not as charity but as a partnership. She'll receive full training at the conservatory, and in exchange, she'll help us reach other children who might benefit from the program. She'll perform at fundraising events, participate in promotional materials, and serve as proof that talent and hard work can overcome economic barriers. The press conference continued for another 30 minutes, with Alexander fielding questions about logistics, funding sources, and implementation timelines. But his mind was already elsewhere, already wondering if Rosa Martinez was watching this on the news, already hoping that framing it as a partnership rather than charity might make the difference. Rosa Martinez was not watching the news. She was scrubbing a bathtub in room 1847 of the Grandview Hotel, her knees aching and her hands raw from chemicals. She had worked a double shift the day before and was scheduled for another one tomorrow. She was exhausted, worried about the electric bill that was overdue, and trying not to think about the disappointed look on Lily's face when she had dragged her away from the piano. It was Maria, another housekeeper, who told her about the press conference during their lunch break. "Did you see the news?" Maria asked excitedly, sitting down next to Rosa in the break room. "That billionaire, Mr. Ross, he started some huge foundation for music education. He's giving away $50 million. Rosa barely looked up from her sandwich. "Good for him." "No, you don't understand," Maria insisted. "He talked about your Lily. He mentioned her by name on TV. He said she's going to be the ambassador for the whole foundation." Rosa's head snapped up. "What?" Maria pulled out her phone and showed Rosa a video of the press conference. Rosa watched in stunned silence as Alexander Ross stood at a podium and told the world about her daughter, about Catherine's music, about the foundation that would bear his sister's name. "He's offering her a partnership, not charity," Maria said when the video ended. "That's different, right? That's not the same as a handout." Rosa sat very still, her sandwich forgotten. Her first instinct was anger. How dare he talk about her daughter on television without asking permission first? How dare he make this public? But underneath the anger was something else. Fear, hope, confusion. "I need to think," Rosa said quietly. That evening, after her shift ended, Rosa sat down with Lily at their small kitchen table. Lily's younger brother, Miguel, was already asleep in the bedroom they shared. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of traffic outside and the hum of the refrigerator. "Lily," Rosa said carefully, "do you remember the man at the hotel? Mr. Ross?" Lily nodded, her eyes lighting up. "The one whose sister taught me the song." "Yes, he started a foundation, a program to teach music to kids who can't afford lessons, and he wants you to be part of it." "Really?" Lily's voice was full of hope. "But it would mean being on TV sometimes," Rosa continued. "It would mean performing for people, being in the news. It would mean a lot of attention, and it would mean accepting help from someone very rich." "Is that bad?" Lily asked. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, Mija. I've always believed that we should take care of ourselves, that we shouldn't depend on other people, but I've been thinking about what Mr. Ross said, about how you have a gift. And I've been thinking about that lady in the park, his sister, who taught you that song even though she had nothing. She was nice," Lily said softly. "She said music was the most important thing in the world. She said it was the thing that made people remember they were human." Rosa felt tears prick her eyes. "Your father used to say something similar. Before he died, before you were old enough to remember him. He loved music. He played guitar, not very well, but with so much feeling. He said music was how people talked to God. Lily had heard stories about her father, but she had no memories of him. He had died in a construction accident when she was 2 years old, leaving Rosa alone with 2 small children and no life insurance. "What would Daddy want me to do?" Lily asked. Rosa reached across the table and took her daughter's small hand. "I think he would want you to play music. I think he would want you to develop your gift. And I think—" She paused, swallowing hard. "I think he would tell me that accepting help isn't the same as being weak, that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone help you. So, I can do it?" Lily's face was glowing with excitement. "I can learn piano?" "Yes," Rosa said, and saying it felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and liberating at the same time. "But we're going to do this the right way. We're going to meet with Mr. Ross, and we're going to make sure this is really a partnership, not charity. We're going to make sure you're not being used, and you're going to work harder than you've ever worked in your life, because this is a gift, and gifts have to be honored." Lily jumped up from her chair and threw her arms around her mother's neck. "Thank you, Mama. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Rosa held her daughter tight and tried not to cry. She was scared of what this might mean, scared of entering a world she didn't understand, scared of trusting someone with so much power. But she was also hopeful, and hope was something she hadn't felt in a very long time. The meeting took place a week later in Alexander's office at Ross Hospitality Group headquarters. Rosa wore her best dress, which was still clearly inexpensive and worn. Lily wore a clean shirt and her nicest jeans. They both looked terrified and determined in equal measure. Alexander greeted them warmly and offered them seats in the comfortable chairs across from his desk. He had prepared carefully for this meeting, knowing that everything depended on getting it right. "Mrs. Martinez," he began, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I want to apologize if I overstepped by mentioning Lily in the press conference. I should have asked your permission first." Rosa nodded stiffly. "You should have. You're right. I was so focused on the foundation that I didn't think about how it might affect you and Lily personally. That was wrong, and I'm sorry." Rosa seemed surprised by the direct apology. "Okay, thank you. I want to be very clear about what I'm proposing," Alexander continued. "This isn't charity. The foundation is going to help thousands of children, and Lily would be helping us reach those children. She would be working for the foundation as much as the foundation would be working for her. She'll receive training, yes, but she'll also be giving back through performances, outreach, and representation. It's a genuine partnership." "What exactly would Lily have to do?" Rosa asked. "She would attend the Chicago Conservatory of Music 3 times a week for private lessons and group classes. She would practice at home. We'll provide a piano for your apartment. Once every few months, she would perform at foundation events or participate in promotional materials. She would meet with other children in the program and serve as a mentor as she gets older. And she would continue to be herself, a regular kid who happens to have an extraordinary gift." "And if she decides she doesn't want to do this anymore?" Rosa asked. "If it becomes too much, then she stops," Alexander said simply. "No strings attached. The foundation will continue regardless of Lily's involvement. She's not obligated to stay if she's unhappy." Rosa looked at Lily, who was practically vibrating with excitement. Then she looked back at Alexander. "Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just about your sister. Rich people don't give away $50 million just because they're sad." Alexander smiled slightly. "You're right. It's not just about Catherine, though she's a big part of it. The truth is I've spent my entire adult life building hotels and making money, and I've realized that none of it means anything. My sister died alone on the streets, and all my wealth couldn't save her. But maybe it can mean something if I use it to keep her music alive. Maybe it can mean something if I help children like Lily, who have gifts that would otherwise be wasted. Maybe that's the only thing that actually matters in the end. What we pass on, what we preserve, what we help grow." Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I have conditions. Of course. Lily stays in her regular school. She doesn't get pulled out to go to some fancy private academy. She needs to stay connected to her community to remember where she comes from." "Agreed," Alexander said. "She doesn't get treated like a performing monkey. If she's uncomfortable with something, she doesn't have to do it." "Agreed. And I want to be involved. I want to know what's happening, where she's going, who she's with. I'm still her mother, and I make the final decisions." "Absolutely," Alexander said. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Rosa took a deep breath. "Then okay, we'll try this. But if it doesn't work, if Lily gets hurt or exploited or turned into something she's not, I'm pulling her out immediately." "I understand," Alexander said, "and I promise you, Mrs. Martinez, I will do everything in my power to make sure Lily is protected and supported." Rosa nodded, then looked at her daughter. "Lily, do you understand what this means? You're going to have to work very hard. You're going to have to practice every day, even when you don't feel like it. You're going to have to perform in front of people, which can be scary. Are you ready for that?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I'm ready, Mama. I want to learn. I want to play Catherine's music the right way, the way she would have wanted." Alexander felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Catherine would have loved you," he said quietly. "She would have been so proud." The next 8 years passed in a blur of music, growth, and transformation. Lily proved to be everything Alexander had hoped and more. She was disciplined, dedicated, and possessed a musical intuition that astonished her teachers. She practiced for hours every day, her fingers flying over the keys of the upright piano that now sat in the Martinez apartment. She absorbed technique and theory with remarkable speed, but she never lost the emotional honesty that had characterized her first performance of Catherine's song. By the time she was 12, she was performing at foundation fundraisers and community events. By 14, she had won several regional competitions. By 15, she was being courted by prestigious music schools and performing with professional orchestras. But Lily never forgot where she came from. She stayed in her public school, maintained friendships with kids from her neighborhood, and spent her free time teaching music to younger children in the foundation's outreach programs. She visited homeless shelters and community centers, playing piano for people who rarely had access to live music. She told everyone who would listen about Catherine, the woman in the park who had given her the gift of music. Rosa watched her daughter grow with a mixture of pride and wonder. She had been right to be scared. Entering Alexander's world had been terrifying, and there had been moments when she wanted to pull Lily out, to retreat back to the safety of their small apartment and their simple life. But she had also been right to take the risk. Lily was flourishing in ways Rosa had never imagined possible. The Catherine Ross Foundation grew as well. Within 5 years, it was serving over 2,000 children across Chicago. Within 8 years, it had expanded to 6 other cities. Hundreds of children who would never have had access to music education were learning instruments, performing in concerts, and discovering talents they didn't know they possessed. Alexander threw himself into the foundation with the same intensity he had once reserved for his business empire. He attended every major performance, met with every instructor, and personally reviewed every application for the Student Ambassador program. He found that the foundation gave his life a meaning that making money never had. It connected him to his sister's memory in a way that felt alive and growing rather than fixed and dead. He and Rosa developed an unlikely friendship. She never fully trusted him. She was too practical and too aware of the power imbalances between them. But she respected him, and he respected her fierce protectiveness of Lily, her refusal to let her daughter be turned into a symbol or a commodity. Lily's 16th birthday fell on a Saturday in April. The foundation was hosting a major fundraising gala at the Grandview Hotel, and Lily was scheduled to perform. It would be her most important performance yet, in front of donors, dignitaries, and media from around the country. Rosa helped Lily get ready in one of the hotel's guest rooms. Lily wore a simple but elegant black dress, and her hair was styled in soft waves. She looked older than 16, poised and confident, but Rosa could see the nervousness in her eyes. "You okay, mija?" Rosa asked, adjusting Lily's necklace. "I'm nervous," Lily admitted. "There are going to be so many important people there." "You've played for important people before." "I know, but this feels different. This feels like everything is leading to this moment." Rosa cupped her daughter's face in her hands. "Listen to me. You are not performing for those people. You are performing for Catherine. You are performing for that woman in the park who saw something special in you and gave you her music. You are performing for every child who has a gift but no opportunity. And you are performing for yourself, for the little girl who touched a piano for the first time and found her voice. Those are the people who matter. The rest is just noise." Lily nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Thank you, Mama, for letting me do this. For being brave enough to say yes." "Thank you for being brave enough to work so hard," Rosa replied. "I'm so proud of you. Your father would be so proud of you." They hugged tightly, and then it was time to go downstairs. The ballroom of the Grandview Hotel was transformed. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in white linen. Hundreds of guests in formal attire filled the room, talking and laughing and sipping champagne. At the front of the room was a stage, and on the stage was a grand piano, the same piano from the lobby where Lily had played 8 years ago. Alexander stood at the podium, giving a speech about the Foundation's accomplishments and future goals. He talked about the children who had been served, the lives that had been changed, the music that had been preserved and created. And then he introduced Lily. 8 years ago, Alexander said, his voice carrying through the ballroom, a little girl played my sister's music in the lobby of this hotel. She had never had a piano lesson. She had learned the melody from a homeless woman in a park, but she played with such feeling, such natural talent, that I knew immediately she was special. That little girl is now 16 years old, and she has become one of the most promising young pianists in the country. But more importantly, she has become the heart and soul of this foundation. She has never forgotten where she came from, and she has dedicated herself to helping other children discover their own gifts. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lily Martinez. The audience applauded as Lily walked onto the stage. She looked small next to the grand piano, but when she sat down and placed her hands on the keys, she seemed to grow, to fill the space with her presence. She began with Catherine's composition, The Song of What Remains. She played it perfectly now, with all the technical skills she had acquired over 8 years of intensive training. But she also played it with the same emotional honesty she had brought to it as an 8-year-old child, the same understanding that music was about memory and love, and the things that survive when everything else is lost. The ballroom was absolutely silent as she played. People who had been checking their phones put them away. Conversations stopped. Everyone was listening, really listening, in a way that rarely happens in rooms full of wealthy people accustomed to being entertained. When Lily finished Catherine's piece, she paused for a moment, then began to play something else. It was a new composition, something she had written herself over the past year. She had titled it The Woman in the Park, and it was her tribute to Catherine, her attempt to capture in music what Catherine had given her. The piece was complex and beautiful, with moments of sadness and moments of joy, with sections that sounded like confusion and sections that sounded like clarity. It was the story of a brilliant mind lost to illness, of a woman who became invisible to the world, but who still had gifts to give, of a child who listened when nobody else would. As Lily played, Alexander stood at the side of the stage and wept openly. He wept for his sister, for the years he had lost with her, for the music that had almost been forgotten. But he also wept with gratitude, because Catherine's music had survived, because a child had remembered, because something beautiful had been preserved and was now growing in ways he never could have imagined. When Lily finished, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. People were crying, applauding, calling out their appreciation. Lily stood and bowed, her face flushed with emotion and pride. After the performance, after the speeches and the dinner and the fundraising appeals, Alexander found Lily and Rosa in a quiet corner of the ballroom. "That was extraordinary," he said to Lily. "Your composition was breathtaking. Catherine would have been so proud." "Thank you," Lily said. "I wanted to honor her. I wanted to show people who she really was. Not just the homeless woman, but the artist, the teacher, the person who still had so much to give." "You did that," Alexander said. "You absolutely did that." Rosa put her arm around her daughter. "What happens now?" she asked Alexander. "Lily's been accepted to Juilliard. She's been offered scholarships to other schools. She has opportunities we never dreamed of. But she's still just 16. She's still my baby. What happens now is up to Lily," Alexander said. "The foundation will support her whatever she decides. If she wants to go to Juilliard, we'll help. If she wants to take a different path, we'll support that too." This was never about creating a specific outcome. It was about giving her the tools to choose her own future. Lily looked at her mother, then at Alexander. "I want to keep doing this," she said. "I want to keep learning, keep performing, keep teaching other kids. But I also want to stay connected to the foundation, to the community. I don't want to disappear into some elite music world and forget why I started playing in the first place." "Then that's what you'll do," Rosa said firmly. "You'll find a way to do both. You're smart enough and strong enough to create your own path." Alexander smiled. "I have no doubt about that." 4 years later, Lily Martinez stood on the stage at Carnegie Hall, the same stage where Catherine Ross had performed as a 17-year-old prodigy. Lily was now 20 years old, a student at Juilliard, and already being hailed as one of the most exciting young pianists of her generation. But tonight's performance was special. Tonight, she was performing a full concert of Catherine's compositions, pieces that Alexander had found in his sister's old notebooks, and that Lily had spent months learning and interpreting. It was the first time Catherine's music had been performed publicly since her illness had taken hold, and the concert hall was packed with music critics, fellow musicians, and foundation supporters. Rosa sat in the front row, wearing a new dress that Lily had bought for her. Next to Rosa was Miguel, now 14 and studying violin through the foundation, and next to Miguel was Alexander, who had aged noticeably over the past 12 years, but whose eyes were bright with anticipation. Lily walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. She wore a deep blue gown and her hair was swept up elegantly. She looked confident and professional, every inch the concert pianist. But when she sat down at the piano and looked out at the audience, she was still the 8-year-old girl who had touched the keys for the first time and found her voice. "Before I begin," Lily said into the microphone, her voice clear and strong, "I want to tell you about a woman I met when I was 8 years old. Her name was Catherine Ross, and she was living in a park, homeless and struggling with mental illness. Most people walked past her without seeing her, but she saw me. She heard the music inside me, and she gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. She taught me her music and told me to remember it." Lily paused, her eyes finding Alexander in the audience. Catherine was a brilliant composer and pianist whose career was cut short by illness, but her music didn't die with her. It survived because she passed it on to a child who was willing to listen. Tonight, I'm honored to share Catherine's compositions with you. This is her voice speaking to us from beyond the silence. This is what remains. And then Lily began to play. She played Catherine's music with technical mastery and emotional depth, bringing to life compositions that had been silent for over 2 decades. She played pieces that were joyful and pieces that were heartbreaking, pieces that were simple and pieces that were staggeringly complex. She played for 2 hours, with only a brief intermission, and the audience sat in rapt attention the entire time. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted for 10 minutes. Critics would later call it one of the most important piano performances of the decade. Recording companies would offer Lily contracts to record Catherine's complete works. Music scholars would begin studying Catherine's compositions, recognizing her as a significant voice in contemporary classical music. But for Lily, the most important moment came after the concert, when she found Alexander backstage. "Thank you," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving my sister back to the world. Thank you for giving me the chance to do it," Lily replied. "Thank you for seeing me when I was just a kid touching a piano I wasn't supposed to touch. Thank you for creating the foundation. Thank you for believing that music matters more than money." "Music is the only thing that matters," Alexander said. "Catherine knew that, you know that, and now because of you, thousands of other children know it too." The Catherine Ross Foundation continued to grow. By the time Lily was 25, it was serving over 10,000 children across 15 cities. Lily had become not just a renowned pianist, but also a passionate advocate for music education. She performed regularly in concert halls around the world, but she also performed in homeless shelters, community centers, and public schools. She never charged for performances at foundation events, and she donated a significant portion of her concert fees back to the foundation. Rosa eventually retired from her job as a housekeeper. Lily bought her mother a small house in a quiet neighborhood with a garden in the back and a piano in the living room. Miguel graduated from high school and was accepted to a prestigious music conservatory, following in his sister's footsteps. Alexander continued to run Ross Hospitality Group, but the foundation became his primary focus. He established a scholarship program in Catherine's name, created partnerships with schools and community organizations, and worked tirelessly to expand access to music education. He never remarried, never had children of his own, but he became a father figure to hundreds of young musicians who passed through the foundation's programs. On the 10th anniversary of the foundation's creation, there was a celebration at the Grandview Hotel. Hundreds of current and former students performed, sharing the stage in a massive concert that lasted for hours. Children played violins, cellos, flutes, trumpets, and pianos. They played classical music and jazz and contemporary compositions. They played with varying levels of skill, but all of them played with passion and joy. Lily performed last, playing The Song of What Remains one more time. She was 26 years old now, an internationally recognized artist, but she played Catherine's composition with the same feeling she had brought to it as an 8-year-old child. When she finished, she stood and spoke to the audience. 10 years ago, Lily said, I was a little girl who had never touched a real piano. I had music inside me, but I had no way to let it out. And then I met a woman in a park who gave me a gift. She taught me that music is what makes us human, that it's the thing that survives when everything else is lost. She taught me that kindness matters, that seeing people matters, that listening matters. Lily's eyes found Rosa in the audience, then Alexander. And then I met a man who was brave enough to turn his grief into something beautiful, who was brave enough to believe that one child's talent was worth fighting for, who created something that has changed thousands of lives. She paused, then continued. But the real heroes of this story are not me or Mr. Ross or even Catherine. The real heroes are all of you. The children who work hard every day to develop your gifts, the parents who support you even when it's difficult, the teachers who give their time and expertise, the donors who make this possible. You are the ones who prove that music is not a luxury for the wealthy. It's a necessity for everyone. It's how we remember who we are. It's what remains when everything else is gone. The audience erupted in applause. Children and adults, wealthy donors and working-class families, professional musicians and beginners, all of them united in the understanding that they were part of something larger than themselves, something that mattered. Years later, when Lily was in her 30s and had become one of the most respected pianists in the world, a journalist asked her what she considered her greatest accomplishment. Lily thought for a moment, then smiled. It's not the concerts or the awards or the recordings, she said. It's the fact that Catherine's music is still being played. It's the fact that children who would never have had the chance to learn music are now performing in orchestras and composing their own pieces. It's the fact that my mother learned that accepting help isn't weakness, and that Mr. Ross learned that money only matters if you use it to create something meaningful. It's the fact that a woman who died alone and forgotten is now remembered and celebrated. That's what matters. That's what remains. The journalist asked one more question. If you could go back and talk to your 8-year-old self, the little girl who touched that piano for the first time, what would you tell her? Lily's eyes grew distant, remembering. I would tell her that the woman in the park was right. I would tell her that music is the most important thing in the world, not because it makes you famous or successful, but because it connects you to something larger than yourself. I would tell her that kindness creates ripples that spread farther than you can imagine. I would tell her to always remember where she came from, to never forget the people who helped her, and to pass on the gifts she received. I would tell her that she's about to go on an incredible journey, and that every note she plays matters. She smiled. But mostly, I would tell her to keep playing, to never stop playing, because that's what remains. The music, always the music. Alexander Ross died peacefully at the age of 73, surrounded by the people he loved. Lily was there, holding his hand. Rosa was there, offering quiet prayers. Miguel was there, along with dozens of foundation staff members and former students. In his will, Alexander left the majority of his fortune to the Catherine Ross Foundation, ensuring that it would continue in perpetuity. He left personal letters to Lily, Rosa, and Miguel, thanking them for giving his life meaning, for helping him honor his sister's memory, for teaching him that the only wealth that matters is the wealth you give away. At his funeral, Lily played The Song of What Remains one last time. She played it for Catherine, who had given her the gift of music. She played it for Alexander, who had given her the gift of opportunity. She played it for her mother, who had been brave enough to say yes. She played it for all the children who had been touched by the foundation, whose lives had been changed by access to music education. And she played it for herself, for the 8-year-old girl who had touched a piano in a hotel lobby and discovered her voice. The music filled the church, echoing off the stone walls and the stained glass windows. It was sad and beautiful and hopeful all at once. It was a reminder that love remains, that beauty remains, that even when people die and time passes and the world changes, the things that truly matter somehow survive. They survive in the memory of a child, in the notes of a song, in the echo of kindness shown to a stranger, in the decision to help when you could have walked away, in the courage to accept help when pride tells you to refuse, in the music that connects us all, that reminds us we're human, that speaks the language of the soul. That is what remains. That is what always remains. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness creates ripples that spread farther than we can imagine, please leave a comment sharing which moment resonated most deeply with you. Subscribe to this channel to discover more stories about the power of compassion, the importance of seeing people who are invisible to the world, and the truth that our greatest gifts are often the ones we give away. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to understand that accepting help is not weakness, it's wisdom. And remember, the music always remains. The love always remains. The things that truly matter never die. End.